So we got a lovely sergeant here. We looked at this last week, I believe. Give or take the time, we'll look at some fetching or two as well. So when we do the nose, we have those basic parts we talked about. And of course, all the little features sit on the bigger landscape of the head. So let's just do that. We'll get that step back as we learn to do with the eyes. And we'll just do a real simple notation. Maybe I'll make that a little darker so you can see it. And what I'm looking for is that, here's the, let me make that clearer. There's the beginning of the eyebrow. Here's the other eyebrow combined with some shadow there. What we want is this area in here, because that is where the forehead ends and where the nose begins. That's going to be the foundation, the anchor, the landmark to place your nose, and it will be in relationship some way or another with the rest of the structure of the head. So we need this little section in here. It's a little wedge shape. It's like a keystone to an architecture, say the bridge or something. We need that in here. Right in here, here, and here. So be precise as you can. I use the eyebrow line. You can use an eye line as well. I use both, but we want that eyebrow line to find the nose. And then that's going to end the forehead. It's giving us the underside of the forehead, in this case where all this beautiful lush shadow sits. Stepping back so the eyeball can hide safely away from getting poked, getting whacked, at least as safe as it can be in a challenging world. And then you can see this little shadow over here as it trails down in. It takes off this way and then fades out, but that's that same transition between eyebrow sitting at the underside, the corner where the forehead steps under. It's a little under, a little on the front, wherever there. So beginnings are super important. We get the eyebrow line and the space between the eyebrows based on the center line of the whole head. That's going to give us the underside of the eye socket and the connecting landmark, the beginning of our nose. A lot of sophisticated things going on there. So it takes time to learn to see that, see it out in the real world, out here off camera. Luckily we got it on camera. And then getting it down onto the page in a way that's sensible, that conveys, and doing it in a way where we don't feel overwhelmed. So instead of really drawing the nose, we'll draw simple ideas. A keystone to begin the nose, off a box of a forehead maybe, that transitions into this egg of a skull or the skull cap maybe. And then the nose itself is just a wedge, maybe. It could be all sorts of ideas, but we want to look for that. So, and then once we establish that position of the head, that's the position of the nose too. So now I'm going to give this a little bit of a tone here, so you can see it. Now I've got the front plane, the front of the wedge of the nose. And whatever this is doing it as well. Notice I'm a little off there. That could be because it's a organic form and it's slightly asymmetrical, or it could be because I screwed it up. It could be a screw up that's critical or a screw up that doesn't matter, but I'll kind of observe that. And then I'll look for the bottom of the nose right here in the same position. And that bottom of the nose is just the bottom of this front plane, wherever it is in proportion. We're not exactly sure. Probably we'd want a little bit more of the eye socket. Feeling this. Probably it's a little shorter than we think it is because we're underneath it, so it's foreshortened. Going back in space, the full length is visually shorter in length. So maybe make it a little shorter than I think, but still at that same angle. That's that box logic. The top of the box, and darken it, sits at the same angle as the bottom of the box. And you might be screaming into the camera, well, what about linear perspective, the vanishing points? Absolutely. If we actually did this for a boxy town we were trying to build, unless it's maybe Minecraft, I don't know if they have perspective, we wouldn't want those parallel, we'd want them vanishing. We don't need to worry about that because we're not drawing true boxes. We're just using the box as a way of placing the proportions and the positions, separating the relative front of that structure, whatever it is, from the side, and the side from the next front, not the cheek here, the cheek here, and so on. And we can map that out. So I don't need to worry about the vanishing point. If you want to put them in there, fine. But we don't need to. We can just make them parallel. It's good enough because this is going to get rounded off. It's going to end up being a very subtle, nuanced structure. But for now, we'll think of it boxy. Boxy. And then we get to assign values to all these. Anything that's on the bottom of the box gets darker. Anything that gets very dark, let's say. Anything that turns to the side plane of the head, or side plane, gets a little darker. If it turns way to the side, then starts turning to the back, it gets way darker. Turns underneath, gets way darker, and so on. So then we can assign values that make sense and give the idea, the beautiful idea, maybe, of the illusion of form when there's no form at all. Okay, so with that in mind, let's see if I can erase this because it's kind of a Prismacolor-y thing. It'll save a little time if I can. Let's get rid of this since I put it in the wrong spot. Okay, so what I want to do then is make sure I separate the front of the nose from the side of the nose, and if I could see it, both sides of the nose. And then the front of the nose and the side of the nose, that wedge from the underside of the nose. And then I want to make sure the nostrils sit in the underside of the nose. Now there can be all sorts of variations, and what we'll find when we start looking more carefully, that wedge here, we're slightly on top of the bottom of the nose there. That wedge can take on all sorts of different constructions. The wedge of the nose, the wedge of that landmark between forehead and bridge of the nose can take on all sorts of different proportions and positions. So if we were to draw not so much a generic nose and not a very well drawn one, then each of these parts would vary. Let's do this and finish this. Each of these parts would vary. So let's vary those a little bit and make it this nose. So this part is going to be very long and rather narrow. And it's just going across, slightly down. Long and narrow, different than that, different than that. It's its own character, its own personality. It's unique. Nothing's exactly like it in the whole history of noses. It has a little bit of a furrowed bump there. I could even put that in to make it more unique. It's not going straight down. It's not doing a little wobble. It's doing this massive hook. And the bridge is narrower than these. And if we look at these structures here, let's do that so we have some frame of reference. He has this kind of old man sadness to him. So if we just lay that in like so. This comes down. And we'll notice that the front plane needs to be separated from the side plane to feel that structure, that volume, that box logic. Make sure we're doing okay. Good. And then as we get into rendering, we can assign values to those things. Side planes get a little darker. Deep sides and undersides get really darker, much darker. And then as we go down, we'll notice that the bridge of the nose and the whole wedge of the nose, it's in here, and I'm kind of cheating on the perspective, can do all sorts of things just in its travel down from side to bridge, from front to side to bridge. And usually in this mid area, it fades in, rolls in like a rolling hill. This can be a sharp plateau. This is a rolling hill. There's a lovely transition. So oftentimes this ends up being a soft gradation back out into light rather than a hard edge. But in this case, this is more bulbous. You can see kind of the bulbous quality. So it's pretty sharp here. And then there's a little bit of a bevel here. And then it's kind of bulbous where it separates here. So a little bit of a bump. If you come off the ski hill, you do a little drop that might jar you a little bit before you go onto the straight, smooth chute down to the ski lodge or something. And notice that the bridge of the nose, in whatever incarnation we make it, is separating, in this case, and in this case, as we'll find from the tip, the ball of the nose. In this case, it's radically separating. So notice we come down here in this very unique arc, hook. Down at the bottom of that hook, pretty vertical, isn't it? Really going crazy there. And then we've got this wedge, again, wedged in, this ball, this chiseled box, whatever it is. That is, we use the values to help separate that. That end is separating out here. Let's draw the whole thing. And separate it out literally. And that is helpful to take it out and separate it. So this is underneath. The shadow shape is hitting here, and this little bevel back is going into shadow. And the whole ball of the nose underneath is in shadow. That's going to be important in a second. Goes back, and then this in here this in here chisel, 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 this, this, this. See how it's kind of boxy? Any version of that. It can be really carefully chiseled. It can be just rounded off. It can be a wobbly journey from here to there. Anything like that is fine. But it pulls back, drops down. And so it's really important that we get some underside of this ball. And then the ball goes out wider, and back in. You can see that nicely here. This is going back in. It's not only getting wider, it's going back to attach to the cheeks and mouth area, whereas this stuck out. Of course, I'm exaggerating this like crazy, but sticking out there. And notice that the nostrils, as they go back in and then root themselves into that cheek and mouth area, separate very strongly, almost always, there's no always in life, but almost always separate very strongly from the cheek and mouth, and specifically that the transition between cheek and mouth, which is the labial something fold, I forget, labial something fold. Somebody might drop that into the comments for me. I'm spacing on it. And then oftentimes we'll add that shadow underneath because that will show it separating out. Those cast shadows that separate out give a good illusion to it. But notice the transition here. Sharp separation from the rest of the face here. And up in here, oftentimes, sharp separation, side plane of the nose from the cheeks. Down in the middle, usually a soft transition from nose to cheek. Here we have a little bump at the end. but still a relatively softer transition. And then the nostrils and the bridge will separate or not. Usually they separate some. Sometimes they don't. So let's go back over here. So notice we've got the wedge, the bridge of the nose with its 3 planes, front plane, side plane that bevels out wide, the other side plane, which we can't see over here, but it would be the 4th plane. And then we have the whole ball of the nose. We'll just call that one big thing, but it has its volume. And then the wing of the nose. And then underneath the nostril. A lot of parts. And then notice how sometimes the parts beautifully, let's do a little bit here. There's a little separation on the contour of the ball of the nose, number 5, from the bridge of the nose, number 2. Here's the far side in this case. The number 3 is over on the other side. Here's number 1, if that's helping or not. And then watch the shadow shape. It's separating the front plane from the bottom plane, or the front plane from the corner plane and then the bottom plane. But it's separating and giving us a boxy bottom a bottom to that wedge of the nose. Nostril separates, eye socket in the upper cheek separates from the side of the nose. Side of the nose in the middle usually makes a lovely, lazy transition over. Should be up. So a lot of different things. This might separate from all of this. This might separate from all of that. This starts it all. A lot of stuff. Take it one step at a time. Don't start this complicated. Go simpler. But I just wanted to show you all of the structure. And then if we can see the nostril, and sometimes we can and sometimes we can't, but if we can see the nostril and choose to draw it, there we didn't choose to draw it. Dramatic pause. I want the nostril to be down inside that bottom plane of the wedge. Tucks under. There's some thickness here. Bottom. Notice that I'm creating a shadow, and now I'm varying from the source material in terms of likeness, but that's quite all right. Again, a little cast shadow, even if it's down in that philtrum area. But we're separating all these major planes. We can choose to radically separate each part or ever so subtly separate each part or not separate them at all. Give or take the character, give or take our aesthetic decisions. But that's what we're after. And if we look at even, let me see how we're doing on time. Almost done, but we've got a few minutes. Even if we look at artwork that's not direct light, let me find what I'd marked off here. Here's the piece that I advertised today's show for. even if it's softer values, we're going to want to get a bottom plane and the nostrils underneath. Now, if we spent lots and lots of time, we could deal with racial differences, age differences. There's all sorts of stuff going on there. I got a broken nose. I've broken a couple times boxing, so my nose looks a little different. Some people's noses are battered, some are whatever. We could deal with all those differences. We're not going to have time to do that, of course. But what we can do is try and get this nut to fall off. I need a third hand. Can one of you guys give me a third hand? Here we go. What I want to do is look at these. Actually, I don't want that one after all that work. This is Nikolai Fetchin, of course. John Singer Sargent was our last one. So even here, let's do this. Let me check the other one I had. Let's do this one. Take it right back over. Okay, so notice how we're getting the nose coming forward and we're feeling that wing going back. Wings going back. If we could see the other side, it would go back. If we look down at a head that we're way on top of, we'd feel that nose, that wedge. We'll look at perspective ideas next week. But notice how it angles back, getting wider for those wings and receding back to attach to the cheeks. So we have to really watch that angle change and check it out. Now she has this beautiful rounded quality to the wedge. It's not boxy at all. It's not doing that. It's the wings of the nose and the swelling of that wedge is much more rounded. Not as radically as the older gentleman we just did, but rounded. And notice that the nostrils right here, the wedge of the nose is right in here. She has this serious expression for that lovely brow. All this stuff is in here. And notice this, it's just this really beautiful roll there. So this would come back in this direction and come back in this direction to roll off her cheekbones. Like so. So even with a few marks, I want to feel the width of the ball of the nose, the transition back of the ball of the nose to the wing, The nostril, if I can see it, and look at what he did. If you can see on camera, I'll do it here. He put a little tone, I'm going to make it a much darker tone, a little tone on top of the thick line of the nostril. So there's a thick line of the nostril, but he put a tone on top of that so we could feel that step down and then under. Step down and under. So a little tone, even subtly, little tone here, and there's a highlight that we can't capture on white paper. Little tone here, and this is all dropping back. But bump here, all those little tones, little tone here with a subtly sharper separation, but not as sharp and as stark as the nostril. And then there's a little bit of the other side, I should say. There, I've made it kind of fat, haven't I? We'll trim it off a little bit. Like so. So notice even when it's really delicately, and you don't get much more delicate than these Fetching portraits. That's why we all love them so much, except maybe Holbein portraits, who had a huge influence on Fetching, of course. There's that sharper transition of the inner cheek after the finish of the eye socket, right in here. Separating out, I'm breaking it into two just so you can see it, but it's going this way. Say, so really nuanced, and yet it's still giving us that structure. So whether the tone is stark or delicate, subtle, nuanced, we still need to feel all of this box logic, the wedge of the nose in here. Ends the forehead, begins the transition down. The front plane, the side planes, the wings and the ball end separating to some little degree, even if it's just in contour, has to happen. Understanding all of that, and then how it smoothly transitions, gets completely lost with, or sharply separates. We need to be aware of that, and then we can edit out, take away any of these things. I don't need that, maybe, so I'll just let that get lost there. I'll fade that out and not make it finish out or be as stark. And you'll quite oftentimes see some tone, some cast shadow under the nose to suggest that it's. Cast shadows are wonderful when they separate from the source that cast them, because then that separation gives us the feeling that it's displaced, so it must be in front or lifted or whatever is going on there. Okay, so I think we'll stop there. Hope that helps. It's fun stuff. So whether you're rendering subtly or starkly, think simple. Fetchings are amazing. Think simple and clear. Think of the structure, and then each component of that structure can be possibly edited out. Maybe we don't need both sides of the wedge. Maybe we don't need to separate the nostrils from the tip. We can just have them slowly roll back to the cheeks and so on. but look at each part, and each part can have its own character that's distinct and different from each other or from the last nose you drew. Okay, so I think thanks, Kevin. I appreciate that. Let's see, AD asked how much attention needs to be spent on sharply defining the nostril. As much as you want. All that kind of stuff, test it. So anytime somebody tells you got to really define it, you got to make those shadows really dark. You have to build that rib cage just as an egg and nothing else. If anybody tells you in art, or in life really, there's only one way to do it, they're almost certainly wrong. They may not be wrong for you. It might be really good advice to do it that way. But there's always a creative way to do it differently. So test it out is what I say. Try it out. Do I like a more boxy version of a nose, or do I like it kind of melting into the face, even though it's supposed to pop out from the face? Just test it and play with it. And whatever you decide, you will have trained your eye to see more precisely. Well, I like the old way. I didn't even have to do that. But by doing that test, trying that different possibility of not making it sharp, as a nostril, say, then it might have given you a clear understanding of just how right the old process was for you. And that's super valuable.